So what I've just suggested is, if anybody is joining the call, if you want to put into the chat who you are, where you're from, what your organisation is, or anything else you'd like to share with us, please feel free to do so. My name's Nancy Rear, and I'm the Development Coordinator for Arts, Culture, Health and Wellbeing Scotland. And this morning we're delighted to be working in partnership with the Scottish Refugee Council and in the Refugee Festival Scotland Week. It's on all week. If you want to know more about other events that are happening, you can go to the website, which is www.refugeefestivalscotland.co.uk. So there's lots of exciting things happening, and today our exciting thing is this online conversation. For anyone who's not aware of Arts, Culture, Health and Wellbeing Scotland, we are a national network dedicated to supporting and advocating for the role of arts and culture in improving health and wellbeing. So we work at that intersect. So that's how we fit in. And just before we start, there's a little bit of housekeeping. We're recording the conversation. There are some people who can't join it who are really, really keen. So at the moment we're recording the conversation, and we'll then work out if we're going to be able to use that for sharing with yourselves and others who've joined up for the call, and through some of our socials. So it's just to let you know that. And I'll be monitoring the chat throughout, so there'll be a bit of a discussion, and then we'll come to people being able to ask questions to the panel and have more of a kind of open conversation off the back of the discussion we're about to have. So if you put questions or comments in the chat, I'll keep an eye on that. So that's all I need to say, and I'm going to hand you over now to the host of the conversation, who will also then introduce the panel. So over to you, Amal.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Good morning, everyone. So delighted to be here. Thank you so much for joining us, and hope you're all doing well. Thank you to Monica from the Scottish Refugee Council, and Nancy from Healing Art, and Sarah, who's with us as well, for this lovely, lovely conversation that's happening in terms of community and the arts, and how the arts can make a difference, especially with what's going on right now with the division that's happening and the hostility towards refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants. It's a really important time for us to really come together and to hear about the good practice that's happening in the community and how collectively we can make a difference. I started my path in terms of working in the community from the very young age of 15 when I was at high school, when one of my school friends, Agnesa, was dawn raided and detained. She was an asylum seeker. And we were at Drumchapel High School, and that's when I realized I wanted to make a difference and help people, because that could be my family being treated like that. So Agnesa and her family were dawn raided and detained, and they were going to be deported. Thankfully, after 3 weeks of campaigning with my fellow school friends, we managed to get Agnesa and her family out. But what really stood out was the power of the community. Everyone from all walks of life came together to say, no, you're not going to be treating human beings like this. This is a country that champions human rights. Children should not be treated like that. And it was just so beautiful, and I'm very proud to be a Glasgow girl. That's what our campaign was called. And since then, I've worked with various groups all over the country, and actually parts of the world as well, to raise awareness about how the arts can make a difference. I established a refugee program at the Mental Health Foundation. I worked there for 11 years. And it's been so powerful to see people's confidence increase, but also the beautiful stories of compassion, of kindness, of listening to understand, not just listening to respond. And I think that's what we lack right now in our community. We need more love and kindness and compassion, because we all have so much more in common than we know. We're human beings, first of all. So I'm really delighted to be hosting this lovely event today, and I've got a fantastic panelists, and I'll pass it on to them now. So I'll start with you, Gabby, if that's okay. So Gabby's from The Amazing Milk. And Gabby, if you can tell us about your work and what works for you in the community.
Yeah, so hello, nice to meet you all. Sorry about the background noise. We actually have a community session running right now, so it's a little bit noisy. We don't have a private office. So Milk was started in 2015 by myself and my friend Angela. And we started it as, it was a cafe, but it was a social enterprise business model. So the idea was that we would support refugee and migrant women through kind of practicing their English, supporting them with community integration, but also in the initial stages of milk, we sort of thought it would be a really good pathway to work for people who had the right to work. So we were very small. We started on Victoria Road. It was a really interesting time to start a cafe business in Govan Hill because it was quite different. I don't know how many of you have been to Govan Hill, but there's about 1 million cafes now, but at the time there wasn't. So it was kind of a new thing to be doing. And we, from the first day, had kind of women who were coming into the space and maybe volunteering in the kitchen, doing some baking for a couple of hours. And then myself or Angela would sit and do an English lesson with them, or just have a coffee and chat to them about what was going on. So it was, initially it was very small and it was just the two of us. And then we kind of grew it by getting volunteers who came in as customers or who were interested in supporting a project with refugee and migrant women. And we kind of very quickly established that most of the women we were working for were not in a situation where they could get a job or were able to work. So the cafe wasn't really being used as a platform for accessing employment, which we were totally happy with. I think we'd thought that would be a really useful thing to do. And when we identified that for most of the women, that wasn't what they were interested in, we were totally happy to adapt it. And so it became much more a kind of community space for women to use as they needed. So some of them would still bake, some of them would still cook, some of them would still practice their English, but a lot of them were coming and kind of sitting, doing a craft project, having a coffee, bringing their kids, meeting a pal. So it was quite a special place for a while. No thanks to us. It was definitely the women that participated in the project very much changed the direction of where it went. And we would have the cafe opening hours, and then on the days that we were shut as a cafe, we would have art classes and creative writing groups, things like that. Milk has always been a place that other organisations and individuals can come to and say, we've got this idea, we just need a place to do it and a group to do it with. And we've gone, within reason, we've gone, yeah, fine, try it, see how it goes. And mostly it's been incredible. And that's been a really special part of Milk, is the people who've approached us to put on a small idea that they've had or a big idea that they've had, and they need a bit of support with the kind of organisational aspect of it. So yes, we ceased trading as a cafe during the pandemic, or just after it. It was becoming a bit financially impossible, and we kind of changed the direction. Sorry, I've also missed out a bit. We also have a catering company that was on a different site on Cathcart Road. So that opened in about 2016, 17. And that very much, the revenue from that was what kept the community side going. And we got another member of staff, and we were beginning to grow a little bit. And then after the pandemic, it was just really untenable to run as a social enterprise cafe, because the needs of the two kind of, not sides of the business, because that sounds really formal, but the two sides of the business were beginning to clash. So people had less and less money, more and more time, and were sitting in the cafe for hours and hours, and we couldn't use the table to for paying customers. So it was a difficult balancing act for a little while. And then we decided to become a full-time community space, and we applied for funding, and we tightened the straps of the catering side, and realised that was the majority of our revenue anyway. So we could kind of manage with that as long as we got some funding in place, which we were able to do because we could show that we had these 7 years of successful community integration work that we'd been doing. We then moved from the Victoria Road space to a unit became available in our next door to our catering space. It was an absolute shell. It was nothing. It was I should have showed photos of it actually, because it was quite incredible. But we did some work with Glasgow Trades Collective, which are another social enterprise who get women and non-binary people into trades. So they, and loads of people from our community, and women that we worked with and volunteers and old staff, we did up the space, and it's now about twice the size of the old one, and it's a fit for purpose. We've got, you know, it's wheelchair accessible, it's got a disabled toilet, there's a little kids space, and there's a slightly private or office space up the back, as you see. And so yeah, it's fantastic. And we now have a Monday to Friday program, which changes a little bit from season to season, but is largely kind of community arts focused. We do quite a lot of women's health stuff, huge emphasis on practicing English for women that want to improve their English, but it's very much become a space for women to combat loneliness, isolation, find a community, access support from other people within that community as well as people out with it. We've got hundreds and hundreds of people who support us with like practicalities of stuff. You know, we do a free Christmas dinner every year. We get inundated with volunteers who want to come and help with that, who provide Christmas presents for people. We have a rotational table that is just full of free things for the women in our community to use. That comes from people who want to support what we're doing. And yeah, we're very lucky. We're very established. We're very beloved in the community because of the sheer amount of folk who've taken part in it as sort of participants or as supporters or just people who silently watch what we do and send us money every month when they can. We're very lucky, and it feels like a really important project at the moment, particularly because it does bring people from lots of different backgrounds together. It's a safe space for women who maybe don't always feel very safe when they're going out and about. We're very laid back with everything within reason, and I think we've been able to do that because we're so well supported by the community in Greater Glasgow and Govanhill particularly.
Amazing. Thank you, Gabby. I had the amazing pleasure to work with you guys last year to run a group, and it was so clear and evident how much of a difference Milk is making. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I'll come back to you with questions later. Can I go to Anastasia now, please? Can you tell us about your work and the difference that it's making in the community?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Amal. My name's Anastasia. I'm a development officer of arts with the Maryhill Integration Network. Just to give you a little bit of background about the network, it's in its 25th year this year. We're celebrated just last weekend. Since 2001, the Integration Network's been weaving together the many threads of Glasgow's diverse communities, from people seeking asylum, refugees, migrants, and those that have called the city home for generations. We've been developing projects which support positive change by investing in communities and providing a welcoming and much needed space, and providing opportunities for collaboration and connection where difference is not only welcomed, but it's also celebrated. Through art, culture, and education, MIN creates spaces where connection isn't just encouraged, it's built brick by brick, relationship by relationship, turning what could be separate lives into shared experience rooted in collaboration and genuine social cohesion. I volunteered with MIN for 6 years before I became a part of the team, and I'd gone there during the Scottish referendum. There was quite a lot of negativity and intolerance, and I just wanted to be part of something bigger and to give my own input into the community. So in 2021, I joined the team as a development officer of arts, and my role within that is to use creative and social spaces to bring people together. I'm responsible for developing our arts and cultural projects, and I coordinate 3 groups, including the Women's Joyous Choir, an Oasis Women's Group, and our baby of the groups is the Museum of Things. It's an art group. So I'll just give you a little bit of background about those groups to give you a better idea. The Women's Choir, the Joyous Choir, was established in 2013, and it's just blossomed year after year. It's intergenerational, it's wonderfully diverse, where we have women that are born and raised in Scotland sing alongside women from all different parts of the world at very different points in their lives. They sing songs of sisterhood, of freedom, solidarity, of hopes and dreams. And we not only do we sing songs in English, but we sing songs in multiple languages, which are often shared by the women in the group, bringing songs of their countries of origin. It really helps people's moods and helps to uplift their spirits. It makes them feel part of something positive, where they can leave home the stigma of carrying a label that identifies them as an asylum seeker rather than a human being. And in the choir, they really get to be just that. I've seen women stand alongside women where they can barely converse in the same language, and they are in no time singing it in harmony. They finish the songs by embracing each other like a long lost friend or family member. What I've learned from this group is that you don't need a shared language to build a bond. You don't need to we all have a human experience, and that's really prevalent in the choir. The women bring, it's so diverse, I can't list all the nationalities, but we have women from Scotland, white women from different parts of the world, whose first language is English. We have women from different African countries, from Asia, from the Middle East. And as soon as they come into the group, they just have a feeling of welcome and home. And in no time at all, they're performing in events. And people that come to the sessions, whether it's rehearsals, weekly rehearsals on a Thursday, or whether it's in the performance, they're really struck by the diversity of the group. It's intergenerational, so with women of all ages, and they just really feel that special energy of the choir that they're really taken aback. A lot of people have said, oh, I've never seen anything like this before, because it's so diverse. We are almost 30 women in the choir, and in the performances more than 25. So we take part in community performances, festivals, and more formal events like Scottish Parliament, and we did the Celtic Connections last year and the big sing-along in Edinburgh as part of the International Edinburgh Festival. I can think of one woman who joined us not long after arriving in Glasgow, where she didn't really speak much English. She was barely singing. And a few months in, I watched her teach other women phrases in her own language so they could sing the verse properly together. And that's integration. It's not a service that we deliver to someone, but it's a genuine connection that happens between people in real time. The women in the choir have told us that they feel a sense of togetherness, that they're proud to be such a part of such a diverse group that demonstrates what unity really looks like. And one lady shared with us that she loved the chance to make new connections across generations and linguistic backgrounds. She said it's rare that we find ourselves meeting people outside of our regular work and make these beautiful connections no matter our age, nationality, the work that we do, or languages spoken. She feels supported, cared for, and respected in the Joyous Choir, and hope that her contribution to others also created these similar feelings. The second group is the Oasis Women group, which is our longest established group. It's a social group that brings women together. They particularly love creative practices such as arts and crafts and creative writing, which is like a spoken oral group. They create a poem at the end of the session. And we've got books published with their poems, and it just gives the women a sense of self-achievement, but helps to boost their self-confidence and self-belief. And what makes the group really special, it's not just one directional, they're not just coming in to learn something, but we actively encourage the women to share their skills set and their knowledge and talent, with many of the women leading sessions. And most recently, we had a project which was led by one of our volunteers who came as a participant to the groups, and it culminated. It was with the GSA archive and collections, and it culminated after about 8 to 10 months of working with the group in a exhibition for International Women's Day at the Glasgow School of Art. So it was something that gave the women real pride. We go out sometimes because we have a creche available, so we can't really leave the building, but we recently visited the Macintosh Willow Tea Room. They took us on a group tour. So the women are really keen to learn about the culture here, and they really want to integrate. I mean, there's no one that comes to MIN that doesn't integrate with other members. Sometimes meeting people from other countries that they've never met, but there's always an openness and a willingness, and I think we really create a safe space for that at MIN. We have one Scottish lady in the Oasis Women's Group, and she travels every week from East Kilbride, and she had to give up other groups, but she said she just feels her life's really enriched by meeting all these women from different parts of the world. Sorry, I just need to take a sip of my drink. My mouth's drying up. Our newest group is the Museum of Things art group. And that started online during COVID. So we were reaching out to people that were very isolated, some with young children, and they'd no family support network or people to turn to. So it gave them some lift, and many suffering from depression and taking part in creative practices. We find, as many of my fellow panelists here will have found, that it's so beneficial to our mental health and well-being in general. But when you come into a country that you don't know the language, that you've not mixed with other people, it really helps to give them some respite, and they can express those feelings through art, where sometimes you can't with the spoken word. Since the COVID stopped and we came into weekly practices, the group's just really growing, and we've participated in, held 3 exhibitions. We collaborated in an exhibition in 2023, I think, and it was part of the GI Festival. So it was shown at the CCA to a much wider audience, but many of the group have commented how proud they felt that some with no art experience at all, that they were able to see their work in such a prestigious event.
Anastasia, we're running out of time. Sorry.
Okay, sorry.
A few more seconds, but
okay.
Yeah, we'll come back through the chat, hopefully through the questions.
Yeah, okay. So I'll just finish off there and leave the rest till after.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Anastasia. It was very clear how much MIN is making a difference in the community, and the choir are absolutely amazing. They're absolutely fantastic. So folks, if you can check them out, please do. I know they might be doing something during the Refugee Festival, the Scottish Refugee Festival as well. So thank you, Anastasia. Okay, over to you, Aref. Please tell us about your amazing work and the difference it's making in the community.
Thank you, Amal, and thank you all for being here. Before I tell you what I do, I would like to actually tell you why I do it, because the two are hard to separate indeed. When people arrive in a new country, they lose a lot of things at once. Not just a home or a job or language, they lose the small, ordinary ways of being known. For example, the shopkeeper who recognizes your face, the neighbor who knows your name, the feeling of walking into a room and belonging there without having to explain yourself. That feeling of being known is one of the first things to disappear, and one of the hardest to rebuild. My name is Aref, and I work as a community musician and community practitioner with high level of passion in refugee integration. And I'm one of the facilitator of the Musicians in Exile project, run by a government-based orchestra, the Glasgow Barons charity, who runs a variety of projects, including Musicians in Exile. Musicians in Exile have been going on since 2018, and I've had the privilege to work with a variety of musicians who've made the Scotland their home country. We are a small community project, and we run weekly rehearsals for people who are either on the asylum process or who have been granted or who have been recognized as refugees. We provide rehearsal space, instruments for people who don't have them, and we have concerts every few months. I myself came to Scotland as a refugee in 2018, and it was exactly around this time, through Refugee Festival of Scotland 2018, that I met the director of the Glasgow Barons, who've just started Musicians in Exile, and they were looking for people who were interested joining their project. I remember I came here with no instruments and no band to perform with, but I was glad that there were some places looking for people like myself, that, you know, they were musicians and they wanted to do something in music in Scotland. I always think about where a newcomer or when we have a member joining a project, I always think about where they're asked to go. The home office, the job center, the GP, the housing office, every one of those is a place where you arrive sometimes as a problem to be processed. You're given a case number, you see forms, a queue, necessary places, but cold ones. Art does something different that those places can't. When two people sit at the same table and make something, you know, a painting, doing a song, a meal, a poem, all the negativity just disappears. Nobody is expert, nobody is the case, you know, you're just two people want to do something. And this is what we aim to focus at our sessions, no matter if a person has a high degree in music, high level of musicianship, professional musician, or an amateur musician. All we want is to provide a safer space where they can make music again, as I did when I joined the project. I try to keep my speaking short. I would love to focus on the barriers that I have faced throughout all of these years I've been working with refugees, both as a practitioner and as lived experience. We all know about the traditional and classic barrier of funding constraints for all kind of small organizations that do such work. You know, funding is fading year on year. And when those spaces close, you don't just lose an art class or weekly rehearsal space. You lose one of the only spaces where people like myself who joined this project, for example, and the long-term residents were ever going to meet as equals. The cost of that doesn't show up on a spreadsheet. It shows up later as isolation, as suspicion. as a community that has quietly stopped talking to itself. We always been wondering whether as a group we are able to survive or not. We're always thinking whether there would be enough opportunities coming to us, for example. Um, we've been having the pleasure to perform variety of Scottish festivals. Have been the winner of the British Diversity over so many different awards, but at the end of the day, we are always thinking whether there are still opportunities for more people to go through the same process and same journey that, for example, I've been through. Because Musicians in Exile is just a very short example, a small example that how it helped me to build up my own musicianship in Scotland, to get to know more about the Scottish music industry, for example, to meet up with more people and help, for example, to remove the isolation when I was waiting for my asylum decision by the Home Office. Another barrier that I can name is something that sometimes beyond our hands, which is the system's hostility, for example. Sometimes there are things that you never think of. It can happen to you in one moment, as we have had people in our project who got disappeared for a while, and we tried to find our amazing member, and we found that this person has been put in detention center and now deported back to his home country. He was a very valuable member of the group, very passionate about music, been in the UK for a number of years, and then this kind of thing happened to him. And unfortunately, the whole group has been impacted. And this is another side of the story. So the message I want to leave is very simple. Belonging is made, not given. It's made in ordinary rooms by ordinary people doing something creative together. I've watched it happen more times that I can count, and it still moves me every time. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Aref. That was really inspiring. And belonging is the small acts of kindness. You know, it's the simple things that having an open, body language and even just a smile makes such a difference. But I really appreciate all the work that you do, and just how inspiring musicians in exile are. And funding is quite a big one for people. I'm sure Anastasia and Gabby will agree with that as well. But we'll come back to that. But thanks again, Aref. Really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to that, it is the barriers question. Gabby and Anastasia and Aref as well, please feel free to just kind of come in. What are the barriers that you're facing in the work that you do? Gabby, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, like Aref said, so funding is a barrier. For us, the most kind of tangible barrier is bus passes. So all of our workshops are free, and we offer a free lunch at the end, so people can come and take a warm meal home with them or eat it on the spot. So people are coming for the community, they're coming for the interaction, they're coming for the social connection, but they're also sometimes coming for the food, and they physically can't come because they don't have a bus pass. And so that's particularly so for asylum seekers, but in a funny way, sometimes not in a funny way, it makes perfect sense, but the situation for people who have status, who are refugees but can't access employment, or are living in really unsuitable accommodation, all the rest of it, their finances are actually sometimes even more difficult than asylum seekers, because sometimes asylum seekers, albeit living in dreadful conditions, are still, they're not having to pay their council tax, their heating. So it's often people who get their leave to remain that then fall into really quite shocking levels of poverty. And people, we go through periods where we will have a bit more so it's very hard to get funding for bus passes. So we will usually, say we do, I don't know, a bake sale, or we get a donation of £1,000 or something, we will put that into the pot for bus passes. But it goes like that because, a bus at £6.90 for an all-day pass. That goes so quickly if you've got 20 people coming every day. And that's for every service in Glasgow that is for people to combat isolation, to combat loneliness, to combat food poverty. People need to be able to physically get to those spaces, and to do that is often requires a bus pass, and they just don't have it. So I think for me that's the kind of most tangible one, but also childcare. Like we're not set up as a space for children, but we are now, because that's what happens. That's the needs that need met. So, and that's difficult because, we'll be doing an IT class and there'll be loads of screaming toddlers. We've all been around that. It's tricky to concentrate, but there's not enough childcare provision for people. There's not enough services where you can go and there's another room for your kid to go in. So, Maryhill Integration Network, it sounds amazing that you guys do that. We do it, but I wouldn't say the space is fit for that purpose. And yeah, food poverty. People are living in houses that are damp. Their kids have got asthma. There's rats. I could go on for hours and hours, and I won't. But the barriers are a failing infrastructure throughout the whole country. Public services being slashed. It's nobody has any money, and the people who were previous years were, when we first opened, lots of people in this community did have lots of money, so we were really we got a lot of donations. People supported us financially to support the people that didn't have the money to access the things that we were providing. And that is definitely dwindling off because people with, jobs, people who are nurses, who are teachers, bus drivers, have also got no money at the moment. So it's like it has a knock-on effect in that sense too. So there's a lot, but you also, people are kind. I think that's the underlying belief that I have from years working in this sphere, is that most people are good and they're doing what they can. So hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you. Thanks, Gabby. Anastasia?
Just really the same as Gabby and Aref. Obviously, like, funding is something that there's so many cuts happening. So, you need that to keep the groups going. It takes time for some people it takes longer to open it up and start to feel safe in the space. So, what works for all of the groups is consistency and genuine relationship, but we need to have that funding in place in order to be able to provide those groups and spaces as well. There's also like language and people's confidence in speaking out. We do have ESOL classes, but it's like one a week. The college courses that are available are so overprescribed, and people can't get places on them, and they need more practice than once a week. So we do. We are very involved with people, and we genuinely care and try to communicate. We'll use translators on the phone if there's no one in the office. Lucky that we have a staff, a team of people from all over the world reflecting the organisation, and that we have them on hand to help with translation where it is necessary. And also, what's relevant to today's conversation is the climate outside of the room. We can build safe, warm spaces inside the hall, but people still have to travel to get there, still go home afterwards, and still exist in the wider community. And when hostility and racism are really kind of becoming more prevalent, and people are emboldened by some of the parties now, then creates a lot of fear in people. And we have had a lot of our members saying that they feel a lot more anxious than they did a few years ago. Most people have always felt Glasgow so welcoming, but there has been a change, and it has been happening over the years. It's not like just suddenly it's come out. There has been that underlying, getting into communities that are already deprived. So trying to break through those barriers, that's difficult as well.
Thank you so much, Anastasia. We'll come to that issue of racism in a moment. Can I just say, Gabby, can you please mute because we can hear the background noise? Thank you. It's okay. Aref, do you have anything else to add in terms of barriers?
No, I just don't want to over repeat what my friends have mentioned, apart from maybe pointing at visibility that we haven't mentioned yet. I think many people don't know that we exist. Many people don't know about, for example, the projects that Maryhill Integration Network been delivering, or Milk Cafe delivering. Many people still don't know about musicians in exile, that there are people from refugee background, from all around the world, that they come together and make music professionally. I think we need to celebrate our own work more than ever. That's all I wanted to mention. Yeah.
Thanks, Aref. And I think the Scottish Refugee Council, the Refugee Festival, does an amazing work bringing folk together as well to celebrate. But perhaps maybe it's something that should be done all year round and not just at a specific time, just in terms of that visibility. But thank you, Aref. And I'll just like to say to the folk listening as well, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat, and then we'll try and cover them towards the end of our session today. Okay, moving on to our third questions. What are the gaps that need to be filled, especially during this time of difficulty? So, Anastasia, you've already kind of mentioned the rise of racism and hostility towards new Scots, so new people coming and living here in Scotland. Gabby, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the same. I think it's really important as well that it's not white people talking about what needs to be filled, and I'm very conscious with questions like this that that's what I am, but equally, when you're not going through it yourself, you can sometimes see it in a way that is less upsetting, I guess, or personal. So the work that we did with you, Amal, when we did role play about it was kind of an empowerment project, and it was letting the women talk, all of them women of colour, talk about the experience that they'd had in everyday situations. And I mean, I've worked with women of colour and women who are going through the asylum process and women who are experiencing poverty for 10 years now. So that intersectional added stuff that they go through. And I was really shocked by it, because the day-to-day stuff that you go through at the doctors, on the bus, at your school, as for example, as a Black woman, but then also as someone who maybe doesn't understand the bureaucracy, for example, has a different attitude to kind of, cultural approaches to timekeeping. There's so many nuances to it. And I think it just never fails to shock me how racism and classism and ableism in our community makes life so much more difficult for people than it needs to be. And the reasons for it are, so complex and stuff, but they just in terms of the difficulties that are given to people who are just trying to exist are quite astonishing. And I think that is, something that I think Glasgow has this reputation for being this amazing inclusive place. And I love Glasgow, it's my home, but there are so many problems in Glasgow, and I think we can't be complacent about, we can see that from what happened at the last weekend, it's there, it's festering here, the same as it is everywhere. And I think we need organisations such as those that are here today, but there are hundreds of them in Glasgow, because that's the side of Glasgow I love. But I think we need to focus on them, make sure that they're getting enough funding, make sure, I need to volunteer more at Kinning Park. I need to, I think it's really easy when you work in this field as well to go, I'm doing enough. I work in those jobs. And it's like, no, we have to, as human beings, we have to take our kids to things. We have to, especially if you're a white privileged person, we have to be doing those things in our personal life, not just in our work life, I think.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gabby. And I think remembering the work that we did together last year and the role play and just seeing how people also they found it really healing. I don't know if that's what you thought as well, but I think it was really like a way for them to process it as well in a very safe environment. And I think that's what, you guys' work do, all of you. But one of the stories I'll always remember is one of the women who was an asylum seeker, and she was in the hotels. And she said that she had kept some food for her son to come back from school and he could have something to eat. So when her son went to the kitchen, and I think he was just microwaving the food and he went to the toilet or something. And when he came back, the staff member threw the food in the bin. And the lack of humanity just really shocks me. Like, it was a child, he was hungry. Like, why would you do something like that? And for that staff member to do that, I just really breaks my heart to think that somebody can do that to a child. But this is happening every single day. We might not be hearing about it, but the circumstances that people are going through, sadly, and I'm really sorry, that's my timer going off. I'm really sad that this is still happening. I came as an asylum seeker as well back in 2000, and I've witnessed this firsthand. I've seen the struggles my mom went through. And it's really sad that, 26 years later, the same problems are happening. And even working with the groups that I've worked with over the years, is the same issue. We do need change. And I think what's going on right now with the racism and hostility, it's all to do with fear. It is fear. And that's what we need to work on now and actually find, like I said earlier, the common ground. And actually, asylum seekers and migrants and refugees are not the ones to blame for the poverty that's happening. So yeah, thank you. That's my wee rant over. Anastasia, over to you.
Well,
You're on mute.
sorry, I thought I'd unmuted there. Yeah, unfortunately, one of the biggest gaps is protection and reassurance outside of the doors and the safety in the spaces that are provided by ourselves and others that are here and further afield as well. We can't extend the safety of the room to the bus stop. And just in recent months, one of our men's group members was bottled standing at a bus stop and just missed his eye, stitches down here, a very quiet, unassuming man. And even like friends that I have that are they're not come here through the asylum or refugee process, have talked about how it's got worse in the areas within Maryhill. I've talked about one lady that lived in the same close as her who'd attacked two women. And people are just really emboldened now. So when you're standing at the bus stop or you're sitting on a bus, you hear a lot of very negative and racist rhetoric. And it's all false narrative. So trying to sort of bridge gaps between groups that are not part of what we do and other groups like us. Sometimes it feels like you're living in a bubble because you're part of something really positive, really uplifting, helping people, but then you hear the wider narrative that's out there, and it's trying to bridge gaps between other community groups as well, trying to bring them in. And we most recently went to the choir performed at the Women's Centre Glasgow, and they're mainly Scottish ladies that are part of that organisation. So initially you could feel a little bit of tension, but most of the women, as soon as the choir started singing, were up dancing, were happy they didn't engage fully, but it's one step at a time, very slow steps. And a lot of the women there are coming from deprived areas. So, they're they're sort of like, what they're hearing is mainly like on social media, and there's such a lot of negativity and hate, and like you say, Amal, the lack of empathy, compassion, and humanity for a fellow human being. They don't refer to people as human beings. It's like really derogative terms that they use. And like myself, I come from a mixed background, although I grew up with my mum, who was of Scottish origin, but coming back from London to Glasgow in the 70s was very it was very backwards, and for me it's like really triggering what's happening now to that period in my life and during the 80s, where these groups were really given a platform, and there was a lot of hate out there, but they seem even more emboldened now, unfortunately. And I think like something Aref mentioned before is like, we need like the wider community to see what we do, not just the people coming here to our organisations that feel great, feel part of something, but the wider community need to see that integration does work, and diversity and multiculturalism are not dirty words, which they seem to have become.
Absolutely, Anastasia, that's so powerful. And it is that thing that Arif said earlier about visibility, that actually showing there's so much more that's happening in our communities that enrich our communities. If you took away all the amazing food, all the kind of Indian and the Chinese food, what would happen, But that's just another way to bring folk together. But I think what's happening now is there's a lot of lack of education. I do a lot of work in schools and work in terms of global citizenship and using theatre of the press work in schools. And when I ask the young people, is racism okay? Oh, like 100% of the time, it's like, no, it's not okay. And it's like they're really passionate about it. So I just wonder what happens after that. But then some kids will come to me and say, actually, my uncle's racist or my dad's racist or so on. And it's really heartbreaking because you could see that they're a bit conflicted. They don't know what to believe. Do they believe what their family is saying? And obviously that's to do a lot with ignorance. And again, that lack of education. So I think what I'm hearing from you, Anastasia, is that's what we need more of, is more education and more visibility of this work.
I think in the schools as well, there's a lot of help needed for teachers, because there's so much more diversity now in the schools, and it's not reflected in the teaching staff. And if those teachers haven't mixed with people outside of their own race and their own groups, then they really don't understand, and they can't relate to people that have come here, or people from Black and ethnic minority backgrounds. They can't relate to their experiences, but also in the same respect, those kids aren't looking towards those white teachers as someone that is relatable to their lives and their circumstances. Everyone's got problems in life, regardless of your colour, but it's an added problem when you're being treated in such a manner, and how that affects young people's like self-belief and self-worth, and that's really important, I think, is to see a change in teaching staff as well.
There's an organization called WASDIC. I worked for them for 2 years, and they do teacher training. So they did a huge program with Education Scotland to train teachers. But the thing is that this kind of work is not kind of compulsory. So it's only teachers that want to know more, that want to, make that difference in their classrooms. So I think what the Scottish Government needs to do is to make this information for every school, for every teacher. Otherwise, it will just be, traveling the same path of ignorance otherwise. But you've raised really important points. Thank you, Anastasia. Aref, over to you.
Thanks, Amal. Since you just touched base on education, and we always talk about funding as a huge barrier throughout our work, I just want to mention about an experience. Just I do my best to put my thoughts into words. All right. I've been working in a project for nearly 3 months, and we used to go to different nurseries across Glasgow. We went through 21 nurseries. And the idea of that project was to deliver a very creative and happy story, which was musical and fun for kids. But the outcome of the story on that performance was for the kids to understand if they have classmates from people of color, for example, they might be here for a reason and they might have fled of something, and how we should be more welcoming towards them. And this was done through a variety of, creative sessions, how we should deliver this and how we came up with a nice, positive story, which was musical. And I remember at least in each class, we were like meeting 30 to 40 students, and we went to 21 different nurseries across Glasgow. And that was only, we carried out that project only through 21 nurseries for 3 months. And that organization who was delivering the project couldn't get more sustainability in terms of funding. And imagine if that project would have continued, how many more students in Glasgow would have known more about the stories of forced migration, for example, So when we talk about funding as a barrier, we're talking about these kind of projects and how we can change the whole idea of forced migration in our future generations by this very nice, simple project. Of course, we also have these issues such as transport. It's not always about the budget or the travel expense. It's about whether people have enough familiarity with the Glasgow city, how they have to, for example, take buses to come to our sessions. Can they be on time for the concerts, for example? Uh, we have to make sure there's no barrier accessing people to play, for example, songs from their home countries. Because we are music band, language isn't always a barrier because we communicate with our instruments most of the times. And this is the beauty of our project. We've had people with no level of English, and then after a while they managed to communicate with, event organizers, people from other organizations, much easier because um, they had the confidence to represent who they are through their songs, for example, in their mother tongue. So our project helped people to have more confidence when it comes to visibility as well. As I said, as I mentioned earlier, hostile environments when it comes to the system itself, that exact member of us who unfortunately we missed having contact with him because they were a very shy character, and they didn't have much, how can I say, they never wanted to share about their stories throughout our sessions, and we never want to ask so many personal questions. We're only there for them to play and perform whatever they want, right? But because of that little amount of visibility and trust, for example, they had, we couldn't obtain much about what is going on in their personal life. And in one moment, we found that that person is being deported back to their country. So this is something that can have negative impact, the whole narrative of what we do and the whole safety of our group at some points. And we are really concerned about this hostile system. shaping up the future of our work.
Thanks, Aref. I've always said the way the asylum process, the system is designed to cause mental health issues, first of all. So many people that I've worked with have come to me and said before, yeah, went through trauma, went through difficulties, in terms of war and so on. And then coming here, they thought there's safety, but then actually going through that, their mental health completely deteriorated because of the system and the way it's designed to be extremely hostile, just, not fit for purpose at all. There's so much that needs to be done to fix that. But thank you for sharing that, Aref. So before we open it up to the audience, the last message, and I always like to end with a message of hope. My name means hope in Arabic, so I have to live up to it. So what message of hope would you like to the audience to take away from the conversation today? For example, an act of kindness that you've seen, or something that makes a difference, and what can people do as well in their work? Gabby, over to you.
I mean, I think the nice thing about working in jobs like these is just when you see the lack of funding and all the rest of it, then somebody will do something as an individual or as a family or something that is just really overwhelmingly kind. Like, so, when the racist groups were walking through the streets in the city centre last week, I had about 5 or 6 messages from friends saying, are there any women in your network who need a lift? If they don't feel safe, let me know and I'll pick them up. I'm available these times. So like that's amazing. But then also personally, my granny just died recently, and all of the women in Milk who, I was off for a few days and I got so many like flowers, and somebody gave me £20, which was a lot for them. And like, it just, so to see the kindness and care coming out from people who are quite Scottish is amazing, but also to have a space where people who are coming from a refugee or an asylum or migrant background are also revealed to be quelle surprise human beings who can be incredibly kind and compassionate as well. And I think there has to be spaces where people are allowed to be the givers and the recipients of kindness, because if you're only getting one or giving one, it becomes really tiring and exhausting. And I think community spaces where, people might come in as a service user, a term I really hate, but then a few months later they're watching your kids while you nip to a doctor's appointment. Like, I think that's why small grassroots community organisations are totally vital. They're human connection. They're not service users and volunteers. It becomes much more blurred than that. And I think that is human decency. That is human kindness. Being able to go, this is a time when I need help and I'm going to take it. But this person who gave me help 6 months ago is now having a crappy time, so I'm going to help them. So that for me is I have hope because of that.
I love that. Thank you, Gabby. And actually, when you were talking there, I was thinking about what Aref said earlier, that, asylum seekers, refugees, migrants are not a problem to be processed, but that's how it feels like. But thank you for sharing that so much. That was beautiful. Anastasia.
I must say my hope was a little bit kind of felt weighted down in recent times with all the racist rhetoric out there. But seeing the scenes in Glasgow last weekend with the anti-racist campaigners and protesters out was really uplifting. And I mean, I'm lucky because I'm in the arts section of our organisation, so singing alongside the women on Thursday rehearsals is very uplifting, and the connection is still happening every single week in rooms across the city, and people that I've never met before who don't share the same language or history come together, maybe come into the choir one week very quiet, and next week they're walking home with other members of the group. They just really feel part of something. And so we're singing together, we're making art together, we're supporting each other through difficult times. And that community and togetherness is very real. It's stronger than the noise that's out there trying to drown it. But I do think that we need to be more vocal. We need to get ourselves seen by the wider community and in a positive light, and to address the negative rhetoric that's out there. It's the woman that turns up at the choir feeling nervous and unsure, but then their voices are out singing loud, they're feeling good, their mental health is improving. But also the Scottish ladies that come to the choir that have commented about never having been around the diversity that they've been at with men. And it's culminated in one or two of our Scottish ladies being part of setting up the Maryhill Against Racism group. And they're out now proactively trying to get through to their community. And of course, they are in the best place because they are able to address issues that some white Scottish people wouldn't enter into a conversation if it was a person of colour. So they're more relatable, and it's really wonderful to see that. So yeah, we can't let our hope be like overshadowed. But we're human beings, and it happens as long as we see that light at the end of the tunnel. That's the most important thing, and not allowing our spirits to be dampened by the adverse reactions and responses that are out there.
Absolutely. You took the words out of my mouth, Anastasia. I was about to say, the light will always win. It seems quite dark and stormy right now, but there's more good in the world. There's more love and kindness in the world. But right now, it's just the kind of hate is being amplified, sadly, but it is a minority. But, all the work that you guys are doing is definitely making a difference as well. Thank you, Anastasia.
Thank you.
Last but not least, Aref.
My hope, my personal hope is that I am really glad that I live in Glasgow and I'm surrounded with such amazing people who are doing a lot of amazing work. I'm really glad that a Scottish refugee festival in Scotland exists, where at least for once a year, people come together and think about people who've made Scotland their home, about the power of solidarity, the power of community, and I'm glad that organizations such as Maryhill Integration Network exist, organizations such as Milk Cafe exist, so many other amazing projects, because when I go perform with musicians in exile, like the performance we had on Sunday in Stirling. After the performance, people coming to us and asking the name of our instruments, for example. Sometimes they have a chat and they say, oh, I've heard of this instrument before. I've heard of your country. I know what you're going through. I know, this has all been sometimes really positive for all the people that we work with, that their ears to hear their stories. There are people who want to listen to you if you want to, share whatever you want. And this has been my feeling since I arrived in Glasgow. When I saw the motto people make Glasgow, and I researched about it, and I now been living here for more than 8 years, consider myself Glaswegian, although I don't have the accent, by the way. But anyway, my hope is like all of these incredible people like yourselves exist and want to make Scotland and the UK more welcoming place for people who've made here their home.
Such a beautiful message. Thank you, Aref. Absolutely true. People do make Glasgow. Okay, I hear that we've a lot of questions. So rather than everyone answering them, well, maybe whoever feels like would like to answer, then you can jump in if that's okay. Nancy, can I ask you to come in? Let us know what questions. You're on mute.
What I might do is do two at a time, and then we can just come through. So I would recommend that everybody has a look through the chat, because some really lovely messages and things that have been said that have really resonated with people. But in terms of questions, we've got one which is talking about anyone who's working with migrants or refugees in rural communities, with any ideas that they have for things that might work well in their communities. And that's from someone in Moray, a relatively rural local authority in the northeast of Scotland. And then I'll give you another one, which is, again, someone's just asking about how to reach out for new members, for example, for people who've just arrived in Scotland, when there's language barriers, totally different backgrounds, views, or unequal kind of access in the services that stand in their way. So, yeah, that's the two, and then we'll come on to more.
Thanks, Nancy. Who would like to answer the first question? Anastasia.
I mean, I think that the arts, whether it's food, dance, art, poetry, creativity, and food, they bring the best out in people. And you know, was it the Ken Loach film, The Big Oak? You know, the way that they helped to kind of cross those barriers, and was bringing together people for a meal. So it seems so simple, but it's what we all need to survive. And like Aref said, when you're playing the instruments or playing the music or teaching a cultural dance where everyone can join in, kind of helps to uplift everyone's spirits, and it brings out the best in people. So seems very simplistic, but sometimes that's what works as well. Yeah.
Absolutely, totally agree with that, Anastasia. But I also think it's about asking people what they want to do as well, like asking them what they enjoy doing, what their hobbies are, or, what they used to do back home. Things like that as well. It's just kind of working. It's like a co-production, isn't it? So it's like working together with people rather than on people and telling people this is what we're going to do today, but actually asking what works for you, what would you like to do, So.
And that goes as well to asking like the host community, what ideas do you have about how we can overcome some of these barriers, so that they're thinking about that as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anastasia. And then the second question was about new members, wasn't it, Nancy?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone would like to jump in? Gabby, do you want to cover that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite difficult when, to give an example, there's a lady in our community who has never been to school, never learned to read in her own language, is completely on her own here, doesn't know anyone, has no community. She was referred here by, I've forgotten the name of, when you go to the GP and it's like a kind of
link worker.
A link worker. Thank you. So she was referred by a link worker, but the link worker took her in physically. So went out of her way to bring this lady in, brought her to one of the groups. I have gone to her house on my days off with my daughter to physically bring her out of the house, to take her to do things with you. And that's not me being like, oh, aren't we amazing? It's like, I think everyone that works in these roles does stuff like that, because that is what you have to do to kind of get to the people who have fallen through the cracks in the system. Because if you don't read in your own language, it's nigh on impossible to read. You can't use Google Translate. You can't, if you don't have any friends and family who can interpret for you. So there's people who, the answer is you have to think creatively, and that might be, finding, going with them to a local community centre and finding a nice person in that community centre that's willing to help them get the bus the first few times, or it's about really embedding yourself into the communities that you're working with and finding the best way to access them and to make them feel safe in your space. And again, what Amal was saying, it's also about speaking to them and seeing what they need in order to access your space. But the actual kind of practicalities of getting your service into the wider world of the people who really need it, like are chronically in need of it is very difficult, and it takes a lot of like people helping you out and doing things for free, which it shouldn't, but it does.
It's great. And I think that tying in with those community things like link workers and other organizations who will be working in some capacities with some of the people that you could be connected with, it's really important for them to be aware of either what you're doing, or even that you've got an intention to do something and you're looking for the interest to set something up, especially in some of the rural locations, is probably, if there isn't something already, sometimes I think it's get on and do something, and people will find it and will come, both through word of mouth, but also by connecting in with the rest of the community around you.
Can I jump in as well, Nancy?
Yeah.
There's an organization called City of Sanctuary. I don't know if people are aware of them, but they work with different community groups, cities, colleges, organizations, schools as well, and they work with them to make whatever that is a city of sanctuary or place of sanctuary, if you like. So it's worth looking them up. They're called City of Sanctuary. They do amazing work as well all over the UK.
Brilliant. Then we've got there's points being made here about how important it is to celebrate and shout about the richness of new cultures being brought in by refugees. What a wonderful opportunity, refugee artists bringing the benefit of all. Being a refugee is not an identity, it's secondary to who you are and what you bring. Then there's comments just asking about some of the misunderstandings. I think there's maybe somebody spoken about misunderstandings within the groups. And also, how can organisers or practitioners approach migrant and refugee communities impacted by systemic exclusion in ways that foster safety, agency, and genuine connection? So I leave you that one. And then the second one is, are there any current examples of working with partnership with schools, education institutions and community groups on focus projects to challenge racism, which I think there was some mentioned in the conversation, but so those two.
Aref, do you want to take one of the questions?
I'm sorry, I was distracted for a little bit, to be honest with you.
Okay, so we've got how can organisers or practitioners approach migrant and refugee communities impacted by systemic exclusion in ways that foster safety, agency and genuine connection? Or are there any other current examples of partnerships with schools, education institutions and community groups on focus projects to challenge racism?
Very, very deep questions to answer.
Especially in a few minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, so I also sit at the board of the Glasgow Barons, and I'm pretty much familiar with what we do beyond Musicians in Exile. I love to give examples so it can be more tangible for people. It's been a number of months that we haven't had enough new members joining Musicians in Exile, and the main reason for that, we think, is there are not enough asylum seeker musicians coming to Glasgow. Glasgow used to be one of the dispersal cities considered by the Home Office, and now not so many, at least single asylum seekers coming to Glasgow who might be musician and willing to join Musicians in Exile, right? In the past, we didn't used to do much outreach work, for example, through our performances, through our community gatherings, you know, and word of mouth. We were having loads of interest from people joining Musicians in Exile, but it's been a while that we are doing that outreach. We are having now a dedicated staff member to do this work in order to have more people joining our project, but that is not happening. One of them is the Home Office system, deliberate systematic exclusion of not having enough spaces for people, staying in Glasgow, and even though if you arrive in Glasgow and you apply for your Section 95 support, you might be sent to another city because they say Glasgow it's at capacity with housing, for example, right? So even though if we want to make more connection, we want to make more visibility, there is not enough interest from people who want to join our project. So that's one of the issues that we currently face. Both in terms of collaboration with the schools and other agencies, we are always open to these kind of partnerships. We are working with the schools. We are working with so many community organizations, attending their either annual celebration or either in a small capacity, delivering number of workshops. For example, we do workshops in Middle Eastern style of singing, for example, for a local community organization. We do workshops about cajon playing, for example, which is not a British instrument or is not a Western instrument, you know what I mean? So we are always open to this kind of partnership, and we are already delivering this kind of work, even though it is so hard in the current scale of the community work. But I think other people in the room and sitting in the panel can maybe have more tangible examples as well.
Well, as I say, we're going to run out of time, so I'm going to make two kind of suggestions here. One, just again to check the chat. I think Malini's put in some really good comments, but also she's put in some very good links around sort of education, Scottish Government education. I think there's also the active bystander training that she's put in the link to in response to the conversation earlier. And there are quite a lot of other questions. One of the things we when we were talking about doing this session is you can only do so much in an hour and a half, and it's also really, really great to hear about other people's projects, and some of those maybe on the call may be able to get in touch with some of the projects they've been hearing about today. Now they maybe know better what they do and create some connections. But the other thing is, if there are things that you feel there needs to be further conversation, and it's something that we talked about with the Scottish Refugee Council, was do there need to be more conversations that are maybe more focused on, more nuanced about particular things that would be really useful to the communities? So feel free either to email Monica at Scottish Refugee Council or myself, Nancy, at Arts, Culture, Health and Wellbeing Scotland, and we can kind of collate and see what else we can do to try and build more of a kind of connection and community. And also, I think Maury had put in a question. If you're in a location and you're not sure what other projects exist or how to maybe connect with other peers, again, if you get in touch with me, I can kind of give you some names and details of other organisations that you could sort of begin to build sort of contacts with. And I'm just there was one other point that was well made, which is just talking again about how well connected organisations need to be in terms of like-minded groups, public services like education, childcare, health, housing, psychology services, etc. We're seeing in some great practice where people are bringing it's much harder to do in a city. So actually, ironically, some brilliant practice happening in some of the more rural locations where they can actually get everybody around a table and have a conversation. But I think that the more people work together and connect with what's in their own community and build that kind of understanding, then actually the arts practice becomes really embedded and far more useful. People are signposted to it, and the value of the work is more seen. I'm rushing through that, which I know is not, but I just thought Amal, if I quickly hand over to you to do a quick roundup at the end, and then I'll just say a couple of words. And I'm just aware we're 1 minute over already.
I know. Sorry, folks. I just wanted to give people space to speak because there's just been so much there, and
I know.
I wanted to honor that. But I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone listening today. A massive thank you to our wonderful panelists, Gabby, Anastasia, and Aref. Your words will stay with me. I think the main message I got is that we don't need a shared language to build a bond. I love that, Anastasia. And that actually, belonging is so important, and people are not problems to be processed. And also when it comes to art, there's no right or wrong. It's whatever comes to the heart, and that's what we need to focus more on. And there's more love and kindness in the world than there is darkness. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you all, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Over to you, Nancy.
And just to finish up, all I would say is there is the festival is going on this week. Please do check out what else is on. It's also in Scotland, the Healing Arts Scotland Week, which is another activity that's going on. And I think that the national day for that is tomorrow in Edinburgh at the National Gallery. And then on Friday, it's the Glasgow Day. So I think it's the Fruit Market Gallery in Glasgow. So again, if you have an interest in that, that's healingartscotland.org is the website if you want to check that out. And if you want to keep in touch with ACHWS, we're Arts, Culture, Health and Wellbeing Scotland, and the website is achws.org. You can also just sign up for the newsletter. And whenever we do any events like these, we make sure that they're in the newsletter. We send them out to members. So if you want to be part of conversations that focus around arts, culture, health and wellbeing, please do keep in touch with us and get on the radar and know what else is going on. But also let us know what you want to see happen. And I'm not a practitioner. I'm a facilitator. If I understand what people would like to see happen, I'm very good at that organising, making it, and connecting people. So that's the bit I would ask. Use us. That's what we're here for. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you to all the speakers. It's been fantastic, and I hope that the rest of the Refugee Week is brilliant, and Healing Arts Scotland is brilliant. And that we all actually then remember that we're all here 365 days a year for the rest of the year, and we can connect and have these conversations anytime. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.